This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system.
Question for all the cannabis operators out there. Are your SOPs tied directly to your cultivation plans? Can you easily manage your inventory and workforce and vendors from a single system? Can you manage compliance across multiple licenses and states? If you said no to any of these questions, you need to stop what you're doing and talk to the team at Regrow. Regrow is the single pane of glass view into your entire supply chain. They're available globally with native localization and foreign language support. So if you have a vertically integrated and/or multi-state operation, Regrow will help you increase your revenue while keeping your entire operation fully compliant. So if you're a cannabis company searching for a strategic business partner to help you automate your business, scale effectively, and make the supply chain work for you, you can find Regrow at regrow.io. That's regrow.io. Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Zoned Properties.
With the cannabis industry now licensing projects in over 35 states medicinally and/or recreationally, market projections suggest that the real estate opportunity related to cannabis could boast a total addressable market of over $50 billion with projected growth. Zoned Properties is redefining the commercial real estate development process with tailored services for the emerging cannabis market. From securing real estate and project development to opportunities for expansion, Zoned Properties helps clients maximize their cannabis real estate investment and mitigate risk. Zoned Properties has a full spectrum of integrated real estate growth services for highly regulated industries, which include advisory services, brokerage services, and investment services. Zoned Properties has also created strategic partnerships to streamline your cannabis real estate project, which includes retail franchise opportunities, property technology and data solutions, as well as engineering and construction experts. Let Zoned Properties help you navigate regulatory nuances and launch your cannabis real estate project. Call them today at 877-360-8839 or email them at clients@zonedproperties.com. That's clients@zonedproperties.com or visit their website at zonedproperties.com to learn more and to receive a free project success checklist. Zoned Properties, targeted real estate intelligence for highly regulated industries. Hello again, my fellow people of the plant. We have a special guest today, the one and only Mr. Todd Harrison, who is the founding partner and chief investment officer at CB1 Capital. Todd has spent almost 3 decades on Wall Street, managing risk and researching financial market strategies. His institutional experience includes Morgan Stanley Global Equity Derivatives, the Gallon Group, Kramer and Berkowitz, LLC. During our conversation, Todd explains the MSOS ETF as the Trojan horse. He shares the 4 trading metrics he follows. Todd lays out the quote unquote setup for legal cannabis reform at the federal level. We also discuss safe banking as the bullet in the chamber. Last, we discuss cannabis as an ingredient for the 2.0 US market. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Todd Harrison, founding partner and chief investment officer at CB1 Capital. Mr. Todd Harrison, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Kevin. How are you, my friend?
I am doing well. Listen, for everyone listening and watching this podcast, before we started recording, Todd is a machine. The guy is eating meals before his next meeting, and he just doesn't stop. My first question, Todd, is going to be, when do you ever sleep?
Well, it's a good question. I think the pandemic had an effect on that. I've always gotten up early as a function of working on Wall Street for 31 years. So 5 o'clock a.m. is pretty much the norm. If I get to sleep a little later, so be it. My wife actually gets up before me. She's up at 4, sometimes 3:30. She's a machine, and usually wakes me up, which helps me get up. But nonetheless, get up. If I if I have the discipline, I get to the gym. We have a gym downstairs. I'll do some Peloton, whatever it is, and then back up and just digesting the news, reading through just what's going on in the world and synthesizing it. It's second nature, the tweeting while I'm working. I've been doing that for over 20 years, starting when Jim Kramer asked me to step on at thestreet.com in Y2K. I think that was July of Y2K. So I've been doing it ever since. That's a long time. That's what, 22 years now.
Right.
So, have done that as a matter of course, and that's changed over the years. Sometimes I was a trader that writes to a writer that trades to a writer to a writer that trades to a trader that writes to a trader, I guess, and an investor. It's funny how that works, but full circle. And speaking of which, here we are. It's what, 11/11, make a wish, 11/11,
Right.
2021. I wish for world peace. I wish that everybody in jail for cannabis gets out of jail. I wish the Raiders win the Super Bowl. I wish, I
You
just
might have
wish
to
that
keep
we all got
wishing for that
along.
one.
Yeah, I
I
don't know. It's been a tough year, but it's like, if the thunder don't get you, then the lightning will. So it's
right.
been that, you sort of betwixt as a Raider fan, you're sort of betwixt as a cannabis investor. So they sort of go hand in hand.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, then the market opens and all hell breaks loose, and the algos do their thing, and we try to get the truth out there, and we're wrong a lot this year in terms of the direction, but I think right in terms of the thesis. And here we are, just working and, not taking a day of it for granted. If you do what you love with people you respect while serving the greater good or trying to do that, then, that's professional nirvana. That's good stuff.
Amen to that. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And speaking about just the whirlwind, year that's kind of played out, let's talk about the issues at hand right now. I mean, obviously, last Friday we heard the news about the States Reform Act that was proposed by Representative Nancy Mace, and
Well,
that
hold
was
on a
really
second, Kevin. I mean, just to be clear, we first heard about it on Wednesday on Twitter. My antenna picked up the signal and posted it with permission for the masses, and sure enough, so
when I say that, I say I'm getting the news from you, Todd. So let's
no,
just be
I'm just
clear.
saying
Yeah.
because
So
a week before, you have to be careful with news, right? Because a week before, J.P. Morgan, the news, which was in the market for over a month, and which was on Twitter and on my Substack, the day before, Reuters broke the news, and all hell broke loose. But that's what happens near the low, on the low. Bear markets always end on bad news, and I don't even think that was that bad, because I think it was the mirror image of Pershing, which was very structurally damaging, massively damaging, but nobody talked about it. JP Morgan got all the headlines, and they had a very minimal presence in cannabis. So, and by the way, there are other solutions in place, there are other solutions coming. So this was all more, I think, theater, or perhaps more intelligently, as my friend Jeff Schultz said last night, or sorry, on Tuesday night on the Spaces, that they wanted to approach U.S. cannabis banking with clean hands. And that's evidently some legal, process or perspective. And he's a smart guy, so I tend to listen to him. So whatever it is, that's in the review. I do think that 25.84 low in the MSOS is going to stick around forever. If it doesn't, then as I said to my friend Aaron Miles at Verano, we're going to open the Ted Lasso taco stand in Costa Rica, and the MSO gang can find us there.
what's changed, Todd, in all these years that you've been doing this? I mean, what's changed now, if anything? I mean, obviously there's ever evolving issues and things that are taking place within the industry, but in your eyes, being in this game for so long, what has changed most to you?
Well, it's a confluence of things, and I've always talked about the four trading metrics of fundamentals, technical, structural, and psychology, and I've written about that on the Substack and on CB1 Cap. And we lost the technical metric this summer, where we broke the 200-day, and we had that head and shoulders, and everybody who jumped up and down. And I'll tell you this, I looked at this and I said, well, yes, they're breaking down, but there's such a massive wall of money coming. Do I really want to defer to a chart? Because I think fundamentals were getting better, and I think credit was getting better. And I thought that, this was really more of a structural impediment that was going to turn into something good. But those four metrics aligned, but it was more than that, right? Because, when you start to dive into those metrics, the structural metric in particular, you had cannabis, the MSO stocks, MSOS was down, it was down 32% year to date, down 52% from the highs. It was the only red sector in the whole universe of
Right.
2021. I mean, think about it. Digital, trading cards, art, everything. They put $7-8 trillion into the economy, and everything rallied except for cannabis. So you have everyone in the universe looking at their year end saying, hey, how do I offset some of these taxes? Like, you know what, cannabis is dead for this year. I'll buy it back in January. And that's what we saw. We saw a massive just puke of cannabis. The longs wanted to take the tax losses, the shorts wrote it down, and pressed. And there was no, you either believe it or you don't. And for what it's worth, we were sitting there, and I said TMI on the spaces the other day, but we were just buying into it and talking about it. There was a great podcast that what's today's date? So was it a week ago?
Today's the 11th.
So a week ago, wow, what a week. Holy shit. A week ago, I was sitting there saying to Jesse as he taped it in the afternoon, which was very funny because it never calendared the first time we were supposed to tape. And I've known him for 20 years. And he never sent a calendar invite. And we're like, oh, well, can you do it Thursday? I'm like, I guess, what else am I going to do except lose money? So sure. And just lamenting to him and actually forgetting that there was actually a recording going on.
With like hundreds of thousands of people listening, right?
No, I don't even know, but I was just like, yeah, feeding my dog the pizza. MSOS is lows of the year, 25.84, and I'm just buying calls and so there's the structural stuff, right? The longs out and the shorts pressing, and then nobody had on their bingo card for Cannabis 2021 that the GOP was going to make a play, that the Dukes were going to try and corner the U.S. cannabis market. And Brady Cobb should get a lot of credit. He should get the champion's ring for this year for sticking out his neck and his guns and saying that he thinks that that SAFE is a 2021 issue or potential passage. Not done yet, but it's certainly got a lot better of odds now than it did a week ago. Right. And we first really started digging in with Pete Landrum about this summer. And I said to them on the spaces we did in September, I said, guys, if I'm the GOP, like this is like low hanging fruit. And then
totally.
when SAFE went in front of the House and not only did the Republicans not say boo, but they went out of their way to praise it. And knowing what we know that the ABA, the American Bankers Association, has been pushing for this for years, because follow the money. So it just made sense. But Schumer is the man right now. And, we were saying all year, how does this say, as a Senate Majority Leader, we love his aspirations, but it's not realistic. He doesn't have 50, much less 60 votes. But he's also the senator from New York. And the senator from New York has a duty to New York residents, U.S. citizens, New York residents, like myself, to do the right thing and the will of the people. And now you got 24 governors this week have come out. And then, of course, Nancy Mace with her bill that's now going to drop on Monday. So you say, how does it set up? It's just a number of things, but it's really positioning, it's offsides. And then you add to the conversation, and I'll stop talking in a second, MSOS, which we advise and we have a position in, but this is a New York Stock Exchange listed ETF with exposure to US cannabis. And that's the Trojan horse, in my view. That to me, especially when I got hit up earlier this week from big time fund managers who I talked to all day, and they're saying that they have this blue chip fund. They don't tell me who it is, but they say they calling him saying, "Hey, how do I get $100 million of exposure to U.S. cannabis?" There's only one way to get $100 million. There's only one way to get $500 million right now, and that's going to be the Trojan horse, I think. But we'll see, right? So if the trap is set, we thought that the trap snapped yesterday. It's now November 11th. So yesterday, November 10th, which by the way, was the 9-month anniversary to the day of the market top. 9 months, right? I think Jane's going to have a baby bowl. And here we are. So I think, tomorrow is Friday. I would expect to see this kind of get out. I still haven't seen it across Bloomberg. I still haven't seen really much outside of Tom Angel breaking the news. But once people realize that the entire narrative of the Democrats are flaccid, they can't get anything done, and the GOP is going to take back over Washington next November is no longer a death knell for cannabis, but quite possibly a huge tailwind if you saw what happened today in Virginia as well. So that's the setup. Doesn't mean it's going to work, market risk, all that jazz, but it's just a confluence of so many different things that I, for the first time in my career, said, that's the fucking bottom. I'm going to call it, because if it's not, I got no place left to go. Like 31 years of experience and knowing this space and knowing the structure and the psychology and the tax law selling and the algos who are now still trapped short, I think it has the potential to get interesting. So that's the story.
Yeah, no, you set that up perfect. So there's a lot to digest from there. The first thing that I want to ask, in my view, it seems like the Democrats really kind of dangled cannabis legislation and they got caught off guard because, like you said earlier, they didn't expect the GOP to step in this issue and kind of be so forward with the proposal that Nancy Mace has proposed, right? So I feel like they kind of were trying to buy their time, and now that this has happened, it's just the culmination of what we've all been talking about in terms of this is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right?
Well, think about it. Last Wednesday, I put on Twitter, the trade of a lifetime never happens when everybody's expecting it. And it just makes sense with everybody tapped out, everybody harvesting their tax losses and the shorts. And now you have a second derivative shift in the geopolitical, in the legislative landscape, excuse me, where now all of a sudden, all of the presumptions are sort of flipped. And it's brilliant politics. Listen, I'm an independent. I'm registered independent, but the GOP is just better at politics, at least on this issue so far.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then if you look at just comparable, the CAOA compared to the States Reform Act, it just makes more sense because, again, and you've said it multiple times, this issue is so complex and there's so many layers to peel from it that the aspirations of the Democrats, while it's good intended, right, because social equity, social justice should be at the forefront, it's not realistic because this is going to take time and it's going to need to be piecemeal. And I want to talk to you a little more about Brady Cobb's viewpoint, because I've seen him be tweeting about that and sticking to his guns about safe banking. And we're coming up on 2 months, and I don't think that he's wrong. I mean, it seems like now they're going to focus on safe banking more because that's the low hanging fruit, and both parties are kind of vested in this now. Is that what you'd say?
Well, it's always been the low hanging fruit in terms of what's passable. And I'll tell you the truth. I applaud Senator Schumer for trying to put social justice first. It should be social justice plus, with the plus for banking. We just don't have the political appetite for that. And you got to take, my grandfather, may he rest in peace, taught me how to play craps. He just said, when the dealer puts chips in front of you, you take them. And I understand, like, Washington, and Schumer's a smart guy, but I think he got flanked here. And I think, the GOP, by bringing forward a freshman representative who definitely got a lot of coaching. I mean, this bill was very well written. It's got something for everyone. It's realistic. And it doesn't get in front of the gravy train that, oh, by the way, is feeding the state coffers, and
right,
by the way, is the number one employer of jobs, fastest growing, I should say, employer of jobs. And then you have the whole social justice piece. And if it took Connecticut 5 years, it's going to take the U.S. a bit longer. But you got to start from a place of realistic expectations, which is ironic that this bill is more moderate. Whereas I think Schumer's bill really was trying to they threw everything in there and just try to see what's stuck, and it just nothing's it didn't go anywhere. And he sits there and he sends out these tone deaf tweets like every day, and it's infuriating.
it's laughable at this point. Yeah.
Well, I mean, listen, how about this? All right. I sat in the green room of CNN with Chuck Schumer the day after 9/11. I was down there. CNN asked me to come in. I won't get into the details, but he was really kind to me. There were no cameras. It was just him and me in the green room. And it really left such a favorable impression that, all these years, I'm like, what a nice man he is. And when he elevated to his status, I reached out to his office. I wrote letters. I called. I told the story, and nothing. Right. Last week, after I put on Twitter the Nancy Mace chatter box, heard on the street, Her, her Twitter team, her team followed me on Twitter, reached out to me, made sure that when the news broke yesterday, direct messaged me. Like, they don't know me, but I'll tell you this. It certainly made me feel like they cared a lot more than the guy who literally changed my life. And I reached out to try to have just to say thank you, and he never gave me the time of day. And I
Right.
think that sort of sums up exactly what just happened in cannabis.
Yeah. Todd, and that's one thing also is like anymore, the people are getting smarter, right? People are learning how to invest. Twitter is an available resource where people can follow experts like you who have been in the industry for years, right? So it's almost like it's just disingenuous to kind of go out and continue to kind of just copy and paste the same tweet and whatnot. And the fact that Nancy Mace actually like had the team follow, and they know that you're an influencer. They know that you're someone that people look to for expert advice in this industry. And so that means that
There's no
she's in
such thing as
tune.
experts in this space. This is a humbling sector. Okay. I mean, and if you weren't if you weren't having your Lou Manheim moment, even me, like, I was like, what the fuck? I went this summer, like, what am I missing? Is this a value trap? Like, and then I'm like, you know what? If they miss earnings by 25%, which, oh, by the way, they didn't, it's still really sick multiples, and you still have a state-led story. You still have the offsides perception between vice and wellness. And the longer it takes for them to, the U.S. government get his shit together, the higher the enterprise value you're going to be, and the brand footprint, and the whole thing. But
Right.
like, you can only tell yourself. I'm just sitting here trying to write my letter to investors, like, which I had to rip up because how many times can I talk about the disparity between perception and reality, and the fact that it's actually looks like that trap has just snapped shut. And it doesn't even have to. It doesn't. Nancy Mace's bill doesn't. It's going to be a long time.
Right.
But the point is, people aren't positioned for the GOP to play ball. And it changes when you have, like, it's like 100-year storm in the markets where you have the positioning and you have this type of situation just come together at the exact right moment. And there's nothing untoward about it, right? There was no inside information. This is legislative, like this. Who knows if this is going to pass anything more than than anything else? But the point is where it's coming from. And if she drops this thing on Monday with broad bipartisan support, which is what I'm hearing, I don't think the market's ready for that. And what is the MSOS is down 17% still year to date, back to where
Right.
it was when the election happened, because everyone bought for the Democrats. But now, holy cow, the GOP just, cornered the pork belly market. I mean, it's crazy, but it's happening.
Right. Todd, let's get in. So you talked about the setup. So for those listening, and there probably are a lot that are getting in new to this, right? And they're getting interested in investing through cannabis. So with the setup, like, talk through how this plays out once, for instance, something like safe banking passes, and all the other stipulations like 280E and all that kind of stuff. Kind of just lay it out for people in terms of what this means for the market.
Well, we don't know, and right now it means it's speculative. Nothing that we're talking about is happening, but the market looks forward, and the market was, it was a combination, like I said, a confluence of positioning, a confluence of expectations, and a confluence of really, just, the all of these stars aligning, if you will. And now you have, oh, by the way, after these things are down 50, 60, 70% in 9 months, you have, Verano trading and coming into this week trading at what, 5.5, 6 times next year's earnings. Right. We advise them. We have a position. I will say that because, you're pumping. No, we're shining a flashlight saying this is a mispriced piece of merchandise. Meanwhile, what, 500 million? I don't know how much it is now, but more than $300 million came into MSOS in the last 3 days.
Yeah.
So, all of this is speculative money. And that's sort of according to script, because we've always figured that the hedge funds would front run the institutions if there was ever a light at the end of the tunnel that's not affixed to the front of a train. And nobody believed it still. Like at the, last week, oh, when they confirm back through the downtrend, I'll believe it when I see. And now all of a sudden people are like, whoa, look at this volume, look at all this. But all of it is speculation. So, but where we stand right now is you have this tectonic shift in the landscape, in the political landscape. At the same time, you have a bullet in the chamber in SAFE, right? And SAFE, you had Perlmutter, with a twinkle in his eye, put it into the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act. It's must-pass legislation. It's got to pass by the end of the year. It has to. And it goes over to the Senate, and everyone assumes that Chuck Schumer is gonna knock it down, but because he wants that to be his cornerstone of comprehensive reform. Meanwhile, now you have 24 governors, I think, this week sent a letter, including the governor from New York. You have now this political calculus in play with the Senate, with the GOP. And you have Chuck Schumer, who's, like I said before, the senator from New York. The thing about safe banking is Cory Booker, he tried to say that this was some for the fat cats, but and the big business,
Yeah.
big business already has their solutions. Cost of capital, credit's gone down 400 basis points this year. Credit always leads equities. That's been a big sort of backbone of our bullish thesis. Credit's getting better. If equities don't follow, this will be the first time in my career. By the way, DeMarc signals also on the daily and weekly last week. So all of these, like I talk about a confluence. But going back to now SAFE. Now, we sort of half expect Schumer to sort of not have it in the Senate version ultimately, or he may or may not.
Do you think he will, even with this new States Reform Act being presented?
But hear what I'm saying. So even if he does not have it in his Senate version, they'll go to conference and they can default to the House version in conference. And if that's the case, from my understanding, I'm not a political science major, you only need 60 votes for it to pass in the Senate. And according to Brady, there's more than 18 votes, and it's mostly the Southern Republicans that flipped and made a play. So now you have the votes, unless Schumer wants to get up there on C-SPAN in front of all his peers and talk about why he doesn't want to provide functional banking for his social justice applicants. And that's really the story here. It's the same thing with the FDA. The more onerous the FDA ultimately, the more relatively disadvantaged the small business and social justice applicants are going to be. It's already going to be tough, as a business, right? If it's tough as a business as it is, if you know what you're doing, much less if you're coming in, through different programs. And the more onerous the FDA or the more onerous bankings, like forget about it. Without banking, you don't get out of the gate, right? You can't. There's no start without banking, and everybody knows that. So we think it gets through. If we're wrong, okay, then now what? Then we got the GOP to look forward to. If I'm a cannabis bull, and I am.
Well, I mean, if it doesn't, then it seems like they're just going to play political volleyball with legalization and just see how it plays out. And kind of, they're going to be racing to see kind of who can be more progressive in that area, I would imagine.
Well, it's followed. I mean, you have 68% of the country in favor. And by the way, more and more states coming. I heard 6 states next year. And then thinking about, the legislators from those states and wanting to keep the tax dollars and wanting to keep the jobs and wanting to, keep the industry. And even with interstate is, that's sort of talked about as like the black swan, but I don't see it. I really don't. I think California is going to be the incubation lab to the country and ultimately the world. But you're going to have different strokes for different folks. You're going to have regional hubs. This is going to be, there's a lot to unpack. Cannabis as an ingredient for 2.0 across both, what's perceived to be the vice or the social lubricant side of things, but really is there's so many cannabinoids in the plant. It's so exciting. 3.0, which is cannabis as medicine, is going to knock the socks off of everybody, but we're going to enjoy 2.0 unpacking because Wall Street still has to come in, right?
Mm-hmm.
We say like 400 million came in the last couple of days. Wait till they try to index Curaleaf or GTI or Verano, right? There's just there's an oligopoly of companies right now that are either going to be bought or going to help dominate the landscape.
Right. Well, hey, Todd, I know that you're a busy man. As we wrap up, I'd be remiss not to bring up, because our Twitter community did want to ask some questions, and you spoke about the state level. So what are your thoughts about the Arizona market right now?
It's funny you should ask. I won't tell you why though. It's a great market. It's a great state. I know that there is some consternation around the way that it's structured with not-for-profit structures, and it's a little bit complicated to get into, but in a very complicated cannabis world, the less complicated, the better. I know that that's an added layer of complexity that just takes a little bit more time from a due diligence standpoint, but it's a great market. And it's, the Southwest, I think with harvest off the board is sort of up for grabs. I know Boris and Kim will be like, yeah, no, it's not. But there's going to be there's going to be enough for everybody to eat. Ultimately going around, just got to find the right jockeys. I think at this point in the cycle, if we're right about what's about to happen, it's not going to really matter who the jockey is, but as the dust settles, it's going to really matter who the good stewards of capital are, and who is smart about what they do, who's efficient. And that's why, when we talk about names on Twitter, we tend to feel pretty good about them. And that doesn't mean we're right. I have some very famous snafus over the years, and it's fine. People make mistakes. You own them, you live them, you move on. But I think by and large, if you look at the MSOS, again, we advise them. So if you look at their holdings, you get a sense of sort of who we think are the FANG, and then you sort of you sprinkle in some of the second and third tier guys because they'll have more beta on things like SAFE, right? But you're going to get more stability with the FANG, with the 5-letter FANG. But there's more coming. PharmaCann's coming, right? There's big companies coming, and even still, there's not, when the ultimate wall of demand comes, it's going to outstrip the supply of good operators. So when that happens, you typically go up and to the right.
Right. MSOS, the Trojan horse, as you would say. Todd, I want to give you the floor. Anything that's top of mind for you, take as long as you want, but the audience is listening.
No, I got nothing to say that I haven't already said. I think I said too much, to be honest. But I know a lot of people have had a tough year. I had a tough year in a lot of ways, but it's also been a great year in a lot of ways. And it was going to be the year that it was, no matter how we perceived it. And I think there's a lesson in that. For me, there is a lesson in that. I actually said for the last week that I have no choice at this point but to look at this as the opportunity of a lifetime, and to build as many relationships as I can while things are tough, because you find out who the real operators are and the real friends are and all that jazz. And I do think the bottom is in, but I would hate to see some of the humility lost so quickly, because I think a little humility goes a long way. And I know 31 years, I'll tell you, stay humble with the market will do it for you. And we were all high-fiving last February, and we all took it in the teeth. At least, those of us who were bulls. And I know there are people who sold and bought it back, but when you get to a certain size, you don't have that luxury, so to speak. And I also think that at this point in the cycle, you don't really want to sell, because I think the upside has a long way to go. So anyway, but that being said, do your own work, please, because I definitely Mickey Mantle doesn't pay your rent. So thank you for your time, Kevin.
Yes, Todd, thank you so much. That's a great mindset to have. Really appreciate all your contributions, and appreciate everyone for listening. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye.